friends, I am here with
Riley J. Dennis.
And we are going to talk about some activism things. So I talk a lot about on this channel about ways to stay involved in the democratic process, and one of those ways that I talk about is protests. But to be perfectly honest, I actually haven't been to a protest in a couple of years. There's a lot of different reasons that people may go or not go to protests, you know, based on ability or safety or things like that. So I thought it would be really cool to talk to somebody who does protest semi-regularly, which Riley does. For somebody who's never done it before, when you show up, what is it like?
I've only gone to a few of the larger protests that have happened, like right after Trump won on like November 9th or whatever, and then the Women's March, and I think a couple of the ones that were around there, like there was a No DAPL March.
I know you were at some of the airport protests, right?
Oh, and yeah, like there was just a lot of people all marching in the same way, and it was like overwhelming how many people there were. So one or two of them I went alone. Just because I didn't know anyone else who was like waking up at that time or like doing whatever, and I was like, this is the thing that I have to go to. But when I have gone with people, it's been such a more empowering experience. Like you feel like more like you're a part of something. People were asking why we were protesting, right? Because it's like you're not going to change the results of the election, and we knew that. But I think a large part of it, honestly, was that it was therapeutic. It was good to know that there are other people who feel this way, and that people who are going to continue resisting. And that, like, just because the election went that way doesn't mean that the whole country feels that way. You know that there's so many people who feel the same way that you do and care about the issues that you care about.
I haven't been to protests since, like, the Black Lives Matter protests that were happening in, like, 2013, 2014. So I remember that being really, like, a therapeutic experience, because even though I went by myself, it was like you're sitting there and you're watching the news and, like, you just feel all of this stuff building up and you don't know what to do with it. And so going out and being with other people that are like-minded and feeling this like swell of support that's like, okay, you're not gonna silence us, you're not gonna make us feel afraid, can be a really, I think, powerful feeling.
Absolutely, yeah.
How do you find out about protests? Because the reason that I remember the airport protests is like, I didn't know it was happening, and then I was like looking at Snapchat, and then like I saw you were at the airport, and I saw people, friends around the country were at airports, and I was like, how did people know that airport things were happening?
Yeah.
So like, how do you hear about that?
Honestly, it's social media. Like, social media has done so much for activism and for allowing activists to coordinate. And the airport one specifically, I remember, was, I think I saw people tweeting about it, and then there were like Facebook events. Like, Facebook events have been how I've heard about all of the other ones. If you're following activists on Twitter, they're often talking about it, and you can know what's going on. Or Facebook events are really just literally like search your city and protest, and you'll find a few, and it'll recommend you more.
Can you tell me about any experiences you've had, like at a protest where something happened there, you learned something, or you saw something that changed the way you approach activism in the rest of your life?
When I was at the airport thing, it was more confrontational than the other ones that I've been to. Like the Women's March was like very like family friendly, like people were out there with their babies and strollers and stuff. The airport one was very tense. There was a lot of police around, and it was a little scary, and I'd never been in that situation before, and I knew that like if I, as a white person, was scared, that like all the people of color around me must have been like even more scared. And that was one of the things that they were organizing there, was that it was like white people who were supposed to be at the outer like edges of the group, like where the police were facing, and so that's where I was, and like most of the people of color were inside. Like nothing even happened. Like I don't think there was any like violence, but it was like another thing to like be there and to experience it, and like to know that if I'm feeling that fear, that other people feel it all of the time or to a much higher extent than I do, and it just made it a lot more visceral. There are certain groups of people who won't want to be here, like if you're undocumented, or if you've been arrested before, or if you're a person of color, like those kinds of people might want to leave, and they were saying like, it's okay if you leave, like we understand not everyone can be here safely. And I was like, I knew that I could be there and be relatively safe, and so I felt like it was kind of my responsibility to be there.
One of the most recent ones I went to, there were people that had shown up and they were prepared to be arrested, and that was part of their activism, was to be arrested for this cause. So they showed up and they knew that that was going to happen, and they, you know, they came prepared with the information of their lawyers like written on their arms and Sharpie and things like that. So like, but you know, they also wanted to make it clear that like this isn't something that everybody has to do or everybody should do, and so like we're gonna strategically choose the people who stand at the edges or who stand in the road, and then you know the rest of the people can participate in different ways. Where I was like a little salty during the Women's March because I had worked on the campaign, and I felt like had all of these people organized beforehand, we might not be in this spot. And like everybody has their own entry point, so I don't want to begrudge people like that being their first step in activism, but I do think it is really important to use that as inspiration to participate in resistance and in bettering your community outside of just protests.
I'm trying to figure it out all the time. I know calling my representatives is important, but beyond that, I struggle with that a lot.
Going to protests is a great way to actually meet your community organizers, and more often than not, they'll have regular meetings or they'll have listservs or newsletters where you can hear what's going on. It's a great way to go there. Like if you go by yourself or if you go with a group, introduce yourself to some of the other people there. Ask what they do. Ask how they stay involved, and trade phone numbers. Make sure that you keep that going so that it's not just one thing.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine most people are able to go out protesting like every weekend.
Right.
Like I remember there being several in a row, and I was like, I just can't do this. Like I have to be working on the weekend. Like I can't.
Yeah.
This can't be a regular thing. Even though I feel like it has to be.
If you can't go to a protest every weekend, can you make phone calls to your representatives once a week? Can you go register voters once a week? Can you go volunteer once a week or once a month even? What's one piece of advice you would give to somebody who's considering going to their first protest?
Like there are very valid reasons to not go to a protest. But I mean, I find even myself like making excuses for why I can't go, like if it's a morning thing or whatever. And I think you just have to remind yourself that like these issues, even if they don't feel super personal and important to you, they are super personal and important to somebody. If you've ever had a moment where you wish people would have showed up for a certain issue because it affected you very personally, you need to remember that that kind of thing is happening to other people all of the time. Try to feel that kind of that rage and that passion that you have for whatever issues affect you personally, and try to feel that for issues that affect other people. You would want other people to show up for you, and you gotta go out and show up for people.
Awesome. Yeah. Where can the people find you?
You can find me on the internet as Riley J. Dennis, pretty much everywhere. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, go check out Riley's channel for more information about activism and politics and feminism and all sorts of great stuff.
We'll probably be doing a video on my channel about politics.
So tell me in comments if you have tips for people who want to join protests and might be wondering about how to do it best. You can also find me on the internet at ItsRadishTime, and I'll see you next week. Bye!